Hey everybody, welcome to today's Take Heart. We've been looking at the question of how do we thrive in the middle of a culture that doesn't worship God? How do we follow Jesus in an environment that is going in the opposite direction? And to try and answer that, we've been looking at the story of Daniel and his three friends who found themselves in the Babylonian Empire, trying to stand for God, trying to live for God, surrounded by people who were doing the opposite. And what is incredible about their story is that their faith didn't just survive, it thrived. And they didn't thrive by withdrawing from the culture and cutting themselves off, but they were involved right at the heart of the Babylonian government, and yet they stood for God. How did they do that? And what can we learn from them? Well, we talked about how they managed to resist temptation and stand up to intimidation. And today I really just want to ask the question, what was their secret? You know, as they kind of managed to kind of press through all these temptations and stand up when they were intimidated and scared, what was the secret that enabled them to do that? And I want to suggest that their secret was that they knew their God. They understood what God was like. They had a confidence and a trust that he was both powerful and loving, and that he was in control of events and he was going to be in control of the future. It's been said that what we think about when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Now, I don't know if it's the most important, but it's definitely is up there. And it's not what we know we should think about God, like the quote unquote right answer, but what we actually think about when we think about God. So for you, when you think about God, is he like a poodle, who's our pet, who brings us slippers when we whistle? When we think about God, do we think about him maybe as a distant authoritarian headmaster type figure, who we only get his attention when we do something wrong? Or when we think about God, do we think about him as the Bible presents him to us, as a strong, compassionate, loving Father who loves us, knows us, and also knows what he is doing? In the stories of Daniel and his friends, we get these insights into the fact that they believed God was in control. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they found themselves standing before Nebuchadnezzar and the blazing furnace, they stood in that moment before the most powerful person on the planet. And they said to him, basically, you don't have power over us. You don't have control over us. Our God is in control. He's able to save us. And even if he doesn't, we still trust him. Daniel, in chapter 9 of the book of Daniel, prays this long prayer where he is beseeching God to bring the Israelites back from exile where they were in Babylon to the land of Israel. And the whole prayer is just based on this confidence that God is in charge, that he's controlling events, that he's in charge of the future. So where did they get that confidence from, I suppose, is the next question. Mike and I, some years ago, we went to see a friend of Mike's, a guy called Brother Andrew. He's quite a well-known Christian. He has spent most of his life serving the persecuted church. And when he was younger, back in the Cold War days, he used to smuggle Bibles into communist Europe and risked all sorts in order to do it. He's written an amazing book called God's Smuggler, which, if you haven't read it, is an absolute classic, and it's well worth your reading. And since then, he's been sharing the gospel with the people that no one else will go to. That's where he feels like his call is. So that includes terrorists, drug cartels. It's pretty crazy stuff, but it's true. And anyway, I was really excited to meet him. I'd read some of his books. And I remember sitting down with Mike and him in the study and just saying to him, hey, Brother Andrew, I didn't put it quite like this, but this is what I was asked. You're basically in your 70s and you are still going for it. You're all out for him. You've been wholeheartedly pursuing him for the whole of your life. I'm in my 20s. That's what I want to do. How do I do that? Tell me the secret. And I'm not sure what I expected him to say, whether it was going to be something really complicated or whether he would tell me to do 20 press-ups a day, or I don't know what I expected, but he said this. He said, stick close to Jesus. I remember when he said it feeling a little bit flat. There is no way that that's the secret. Stick close to Jesus. Come on, Brother Andrew. What's the real secret? But that's what he said. And that was about 14 years ago now. And in the last 14 years, I don't think I have been given a more profound piece of advice. Where did Daniel and his friends get their confidence in God from? They stuck close to him. You know, it wasn't that they woke up every morning thinking we've got to resist temptation and stand up to intimidation. It's just that they woke up and they pursued God. They sought him. They stuck close to him. And we see that in the habits of their lives. You know, we get a little insight into Daniel's prayer life. He used to pray 3 times a day. They caught him at it and threw him in a lion's den for it, but he still kept doing it. We see that they would have trusted in the promises of God. So Jeremiah, the prophet, was around at this time, and he sent a prophecy to the exiles in Babylon, which would have included Daniel. And it's from Jeremiah 29. I'll just read you a little bit from verse 11. God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." They would have trusted God's word. They listened to God. The second half of Daniel's full of these crazy, difficult to understand visions that Daniel had, but there's no way he could have had those visions if his heart wasn't turned towards God and open to him. It was relationship. That's where everything else flows from our relationship with him. And when we know him, just like Daniel and his friends, we have confidence that he's powerful and that he's good and that he is in control. That knowledge changes how we live today, how we live now. Don't underestimate what a difference it makes in terms of how we live when we know God to be who he is. If we struggle to trust him in an area, it's because we don't yet know his heart in that area. And I have loads of areas where I need to know him better. But think about it like, you know, during the lockdown, I think lots of people have been watching replays of the greatest sports matches because, of course, there's been not a lot of live sport happening, if any. And, you know, it's totally different watching a replay of an FA Cup final or a Wimbledon final because we know what the score is at the end. And so the whole way you watch it's different, isn't it? Because you're not sitting on the edge of your seat, you're kind of sitting back, eating some chips and, you know, having a drink. You can be so relaxed because you know how it ends, even at those moments of tension where when you watched it the first time around, your heart was racing. It's just you can sit back and chill. You know how it ends. We know how it all ends because we're told at the back of the book, God wins. Christian hope is not wishful thinking. It's confidence that flows from knowing God is the beginning of things and he is the end of things. Jesus is the beginning and he is the end. He is good and he's our friend. How do we thrive in the midst of a culture that doesn't follow him? We stick close to him. We pursue relationship with him. And from that, everything else flows.